Good evening, everyone, or late afternoon, depending on where you are. It's really wonderful to be with you today. You are joining us for a poetry workshop entitled From Blank to Blank, How and Why to Use Blackout Poetry. So we're here on the third day of our Tell It Slant Poetry Festival at the Emily Dickinson Museum. My name is Brooke Steinhauser. I am Senior Director of Programs at the museum, and we are so delighted to be welcoming participants from all over the world this week. We would love to know where you are coming from. So if you'd like to pop into the chat at this time and tell us just that, we'd love to see that. Let's see, tonight's workshop features two amazing authors who are going to explore the effects of different blackout poetry strategies and the uses of erasure in writing. So we invite your participation through the chat space, but also through the Q&A function. There will be time at the end set aside for questions, and we would encourage you to place your questions in the Q&A at any point in the evening. We'll be together for about 90 minutes. And where are you all coming from? All over. We have Brazil, Chicago. Hey, Greenfield, Massachusetts. I see you. This is so exciting. South Dakota, Michigan, California. This is just wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. So I'm going to introduce you now to the authors of this wonderful book, which you'll hear more about in a moment. Matt Donovan is the author of 4 books and 2 chapbooks, including most recently The Dug Up Gun Museum and Missing Department, a collection of poetry and art made in collaboration with the artist Leisha Boughton. He is a recipient of a Whitting Award, a Rome Prize in Literature, a Creative Capital Grant, a Pushcart Prize, and an NEA Fellowship in Literature. And he serves as director of the Boutel Day Poetry Center at Smith College and lives right here in Amherst, Massachusetts. We're very lucky to have him as our neighbor. And Jenny George, the author of The Dream of Reason and After Image, both from Copper Canyon Press, as well as the chapbook. Let's see. Do I have the name of that chapbook, Jenny?
It might just be an asterisk.
Asterisk.
Mhm.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't deliberately deleted it there. Asterisk. And she has received support from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Iowa Writers Workshop, Lannan Foundation, McDowell, and Yaddo. Her poems have appeared in Kenyon Review, the New York Times, Plowshares, Poetry, and elsewhere. She lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she works in social justice philanthropy. Recently, these poets have co-authored We Are Not Where We Are, a chapter-by-chapter erasure of Thoreau's Walden, challenging its deeply flawed beliefs about individualism, the natural world, and the relationships between people and the land. And they have generously provided us with an exclusive opportunity to purchase this book for only 10 bucks, 10 clams, using the coupon code Tell It Slant at the link that I will place in the chat in a moment. Matt and Jenny, thank you so much for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. It's incredibly exciting to be here. Jenny and I have been looking forward to this for a long time. And then I'm all the more excited just to see where people are zooming in. I mean, literally around the world and so many wonderful locations. Shout out to New Mexico, where Jenny and I met for the first time way back when. But thank you all for making time for this workshop. And I definitely want to thank the Dickinson Museum and everyone there, but especially Brooke for including us and their really just stellar programming for this week at the Tell It Slant Festival. So we're really excited to talk to you all about erasure and blackout poetry, and feel really privileged to be here with you. So I have been tasked with kicking things off, and I actually want to start with an apology for our title for our talk. I think it sounds too prescriptive, and I'm the one that came up with it, I think. So I'm throwing myself under the bus here. But the how and why to use blackout poetry, the how is something that it pretends that there's a particular way to go about this. And I think one of the things Jenny and I want to underscore is there's no one way to do this. We want to celebrate and explore with you some different ways of going about this. And we're also not going to just be talking about um, the black just solely blackout poetry. We'll talk also about erasure, and which is something that Jenny and I used rather than blackout for the "We Are Not Where We Are" collection that Brooke mentioned. But we want to explore. We want to stress that there's no singular way to go about this, and our title comes from a really haunting Dickinson poem where it's something that feels so postmodern and filled with like 20th century dread to me. It begins from blank to blank, a threadless way. I love that opening, and I love how it relates to what we're going to talk about today. But it's that threadless way that I wanted to also just draw your attention to, because there is no one way to do it, and there's a threadless path, and we're going to hopefully explore with you a number of different approaches. So just really quickly, here's the structure of today's workshops. We're going to just introduce some ideas and questions surrounding acts of erasure and blackout poetry, including why you might do it. Jenny and I are going to lead a close reading of one particularly powerful act of erasure that has excited us for many years, and it might be familiar to you, but it's something that if it's not, we want to share with you for sure. We'll read one poem each from our collection, our book, which was an erasure of Thoreau's Walden, as Brooke mentioned. We thought it might be useful to give you some insights into our process that Jenny and I took through that as we created our own erasures. I think we had some overlapping techniques, but also some different approaches to how we went about it. And we just thought that might be useful to hear too. We're going to try our hands at a provided text. So hopefully that'll be something fun for all of us to do together and celebrate the different possibilities that will, I hope, come out of that. And then we definitely have some additional examples that we want to share with you. I hope you all received our PDF that we sent out. It's available in the link if you for the programming if you didn't already receive that. We'll highlight a few of those, and we want to give you a prompt that will hopefully facilitate not just one erasure, but a lifetime of interest in this process and what it might afford your own writing and explorations.
Great. Sounds really good. I'm excited to be doing this with you, Matt, and also to be spending time with people, even virtually, who are lovers of poetry, writers of poetry. That is a real pleasure. So I feel like the suspense is building. Erasure poetry, what is it? Blackout poetry, what do we even mean? Um, uh, so for those of you who are experiencing this form for the first time or trying it out for the first time, erasure poetry and blackout poetry, sometimes the phrases get used interchangeably. They're a form of poetry where we take some kind of existing text and we erase words or like physically black out or cut out or otherwise remove parts of that existing text and create a new poem, like a new composition from the remaining words. Oftentimes the most successful erasure poetry comments on that original text in some way. So it doesn't involve writing the way we normally think of it, where we like sit down, we face the blank page, and maybe we have an idea or we write into the void. It's working with found language, but it still does require a kind of creative vision, or the ability to see a new context for an old work. So that's what we mean when we're talking about erasure poetry today. And there's a lot of reasons why we might attempt this form. Just from a purely like logistical, like like a practical standpoint, sometimes facing that blank page can be pretty stressful. Like I find that's like one of the hardest parts of writing is that like just starting from nothing. So starting with an existing text, like it automatically puts you into a relationship with something. So that just can be like a way to jump in and start like playing a little bit and experimenting. And the other thing is that writers in this space might recognize is that sometimes restraint or restriction can actually be generative. So having like only some words that you get to use, or yeah, not just all of the vocabulary from all of English language, you actually have a smaller pool to work with, and sometimes that restriction can actually like, yeah, generate new kind of energies or bring new ideas to mind. So that's just off the top some stuff about erasure poetry. Matt, what other kinds of like possibilities for you come to mind?
Yeah, well, I just want to underscore some of the things that you said because I'm seeing it echoed also in the chat. Nicole Brickman, I was seeing that you love to use blackout poetry with middle schoolers. I agree. It's such a great way to introduce poetry, even um, we use it a lot at Smith with both middle schoolers and high schoolers because in part of that being intimidated by the blank page, right? You're taking away something rather than starting with the abyss and how do I even begin this? The language is already there. The language is in place, and the language it can be a kind of excavation process to move through it. And find that the strange composite of language or the poems and the voices and the tones that are lurking beneath that. But that can be less daunting than just again starting with nothing with a literal blank there on the page. Um, I also I do think about it. Well, I mean, I'll just say two seemingly contradictory things, or maybe just two very different ways to approach it. One is just a playful engagement with the literature of the past. It's a way to it can be a way to delve into a new mode of diction that might not be something that you would ordinarily incorporate into your own work. It can just be, again, like just a playful way of having a conversation with that poet or with that writer. And then, but the other way to approach it is it can be incredibly political and powerfully political too, as a way of thinking about a text that you really are feeling a need to write back to, a voice that you want to clap back to, a way of a mode of discourse that might be offensive, that might have an opportunity for you to not silence that voice necessarily, but appropriate that voice in order to offer up a corrective to that thing. And we'll be looking at, I mean, just to look ahead, we'll be looking at Tracy K. Smith's declaration. That was the close dive, the close reading that we wanted to do with you, because it stems from that. It stems from an urgent political need. And both of those opportunities can be equally fulfilling and equally meaningful. So we wanted to explore both of those and just make sure we're highlighting projects that have used both of those things. Well, maybe I'll hold off and I'll hold off some of my additional thoughts until we get to them.
Yeah, that that piece about the like political engagement um, is such a rich opportunity. And I think it can be, like you said, clap back, Matt. It can be a way of refuting something from the past, but also adding to, or one thing I think that successful erasures do is they sort of like unearth something that's inside the text already, or the claim is that there's like, oh, this is the unspoken text that's inside of the original text. And I think that like relationship between what's on the page in the original and what gets unearthed is also part of that can be part of that sort of political move, and it also can be kind of like a dance with the original text. And there's a quote that the brilliant writer Robin Cost Lewis has about good erasure, which I just love. And she said, "When it is really, really, really good, erasure can reveal more about the projects of both writers simultaneously. So the writer of the source material, and then you as the poet of the erasure," which just feels like yeah, what a great opportunity to have that like dialogue, that dance or that confrontation.
Yeah, I do want to comment on one thing that I'm seeing in the text because there's a question, can we try using it with the Bible? Of course. No, there
Add that
there are
in.
like I think any project that occurs to you like that is worth exploring and then simultaneously to explore how and why you might be doing it. Jenny and I can talk more about that when we get to our Thoreau project too. But yeah, you don't need to ask for permission to do this. Although I do understand having some trepidation depending on what the text might be. So I'll just tell a story about a mutual friend of ours, Dana Levin, the wonderful poet. Um, when my amazing colleague, Jen Blackburn, who I think is on this
Yes.
out there. Hello, Jen, and shout out to Jen Blackburn from the Boutel Day Poetry Center at Smith. Jen and I started a community blackout poetry several years ago, and I'll give some examples of that. But the idea there basically is that we would choose a text and we would all apply some blackout poetry techniques to different pages from that same text, and we'd bring it all together at the end as a final community version of that text. We started with Walt Whitman as a canonical writer. We started with him as someone who might be someone that would offer up the kind of language that would be immediately compelling to us, and it wasn't from a place of anger towards Walt Whitman, but we saw it as a playful engagement with Uncle Walt, and we also saw it as an opportunity to, explore a patriarchal figure within the American canon too. And the connection here to Dana Levin is I sent her a page and I said, we'd love for you to take a stab at this. And her initial response was, Eesh, like I don't think I want to do that. It felt like a violation of the text and of a poet who was really important to her and into American poetry. But I do want to say she came around. She's got an essay in her forthcoming collection where she sort of outlines that trajectory for her, where she had ended up having a cathartic moment in a breakthrough creative moment through the course of erasing a page from Song of Myself, for instance. So it suddenly offered unexpected opportunities for her. So the good news is we're not using the original drafts of anyone's work. No poems will be harmed in the process of this. And it can afford, I think, revelatory creative breakthroughs if you allow yourself just to be open to the process.
And I know there's teachers with us today, and I would say it's a great teaching tool. We talked about doing erasures with middle school students. There's that thing where everybody's looking really, really deeply and closely at the language of one text. And so just the way that you have to get in there with the language when you're doing an erasure, it's just a deep process because you're looking at every single word, right? What stays, what goes, what am I choosing, what am I jettisoning? And then also it can be really interesting to see when a group of people have done an erasure of the same text, all the different versions that get surfaced. So it's a great thing to bring into a classroom. Um, we've been talking about erasures like that, like it's a set form with maybe set rules, and I would say that there are no like rules when it comes to erasure. It's the threadless way, like Matt said. And it's also worth considering your approach when you set out to do one of these poems. Um, Typically, when folks are doing erasure or blackout, they're adhering to the linear order of the words. So, you start with a whole block of text, you're choosing what you want to keep, you're taking some stuff out, and generally the rule is that the words that you're surfacing are in their existing order from the original, and most people don't get in and like alter the words or mangle them too much, because at some point then you're just writing. If you're picking out letters, at some point you lose some of the fidelity to the original text. So people typically keep with the same order that they're presented in, and you can choose like how much do you want to manipulate the language. Another big choice that you'll make is about lineation and spacing, because you might choose to leave whole blocks of words together, or really separate the language that you've chosen. So a choice you'll want to make when it comes to your own erasures is like, do you want to stitch back together the lines? Do you want to create line breaks? And the examples that we'll look at shows a bunch of different approaches to those different kinds of rules.
Yeah, and then as Jenny was saying, like there is no one rule, there is no one way of doing it, and some of that picking apart of letters, we'll look at a really powerful example of that in a moment too. I did see one question pop up as well that is probably worth clarifying. It was asking about the difference between blackout poetry and erasure poetry. It's a really great question, and I think for many years I kind of used the terms interchangeably, and I think many people do, which is not a crime. I think it's fine, but technically, my understanding is that erasure is looking at the entirety of a text and create and erasing words. Through the course of that. So like for us, it was erasing an entire chapter or working through erasings of words through an entire chapter of Walden versus blackout poetry is typically using a single page. And that, of course, is all on its own way to scale. And you're just using, typically, again, for blackout poetry, a single page that you're blacking out words on, and then orchestrating somehow the words that are remaining there on the page. If that's helpful at all as a distinction. Great. So the first thing as promised, we wanted to do with all of you, take a close look at Tracy K. Smith's erasure of the Declaration of Independence. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. So it's in your packets, but it'll also be here on the screen. And luckily, there is a really wonderful recording of Tracy K. Smith reading it. And I'm going to just let the poem speak and work for itself. But as you're hearing it, Jenny and I will start with just sharing some noticings of our own, but feel free to use the chat to offer up things that you notice that strike you. That's always my question to my students, like not what does a poem mean, but what is it? What do you notice? Because anything that you're noticing in a poem can be it can suggest meaning in all kinds of ways. So let me do this. Can you all, Jenny, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. Please let me know, Jenny, if you can't hear this, but here we go. So again, declaration is which is already important in the title, the declaration. I promised I'd shut up. I'm going to try and shut up and just let Tracy K. Smith read this poem to you. Oop.
Declaration. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has plundered ravaged destroyed the lives of taking away abolishing our most valuable, and altering fundamentally the forms of in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, taken captive on the high seas to bear.
Great. I think what I'm going to try and do, because I'm guessing it might be useful to have the poem up as we're continuing to explore it. Great. So now I think everyone can see the entirety of that.
Okay.
Great. Jenny, do you want to kick things
Oh,
off on just things that immediately strike you?
I mean, I noticed my full body goosebumps. I mean, that's the first thing. That poem is just extraordinary. Yeah, so an erasure of the Declaration of Independence. And one of the things that really stood out to me just in this encounter, I've seen this poem many times and heard it many times, that technique of the foreshortened phrases. So she's erased some of the language that feels like it might be more like content or specifics, and kind of just left these truncated bits of rhetoric. And that has an amazing quality where by erasing the specifics, it kind of just like lets the deep meaning fill in. So like that's one thing that I just noticed right now, like that she's erased the yeah, like the nouns that would come at the end of those um, plundered our, ravaged our, destroyed the lives of our, and just leaving the first parts of those phrases actually makes them so much more huge and terrible and yeah, that we fill in with our knowing and that the silence kind of takes over the immensity of the um, plundering and ravaging that she's describing. I feel like that's an amazing use of erasure. It's the scale of what she achieves by taking out and the feeling that the poem has. To really like that ratio is quite something.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on the goosebump front too. And I think for me, part of the power of the reading is that underscoring of the clipped, fragmented nature of the language in this piece. The way her voice, we'll start to read. He has plundered our, and then the way in which I can't begin to mimic it, but the way in which it just clips off so abruptly, and I see it too. I love what you were saying about the how it invites us to fill in the history there. It also seems like it is a gesture towards what is unspeakable, like what language cannot encapsulate, what how our signifiers fail us there. And you see it at the end as well, right? That we have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. That phrase, in this context takes on obviously a whole new horror with the evocation of our history of slavery. And then as it cascades down the page there at the end with that to bear, and that it does seem to ring out with again that thing that is unsayable. We can't even begin to find the language for the horrors that have been endured.
Yeah, it definitely she's using what's erased and what has been erased, like the form of erasure to really surface like what was erased in the actual Declaration of Independence, um, just with so much depthness. And I also feel like there's a because of having the like all of the specifics of this the grievances taken out, then the we and the our um, she gets to use the sort of generic quality of the hour to flip the subject and who's speaking in the original document to who we hear speaking in this one. Yeah, that by taking out the original signifiers, she's able to draw on like a whole other feels like chorus of voices who can take over that hour in the poem.
Um, I'm going to stop sharing. Just I hope because I want to see some of the responses in the chat. Just while before we get to that, though, I wanted to just bring up a line that I read somewhere. I don't remember the context, but Tracy K. Smith was talking about the process of making this poem, and what she said was she felt at some point through the process as if she was not making choices but uncovering a pre-existing text. And I really love that idea for this piece in particular, that these grievances and these horrors are lurking under that the original declaration all along.
Mhm.
Um, I just think that's a really powerful way to say that. And I think Jenny, you said something similar with it when you were talking about text during the introductions of things too. Let me just go through and just see what some of you are saying. Yeah, the repetition of that R is so incredibly powerful, and the way that that a kind of like omnipotent, malignant he and them
Mhm.
appears in this text and becomes something that is obviously directly malignant to the we, which we go along. We're a long way from we the people. This we is evoking a different body of people that otherwise were silenced in this document. Jenny, were you going to say something?
Well, there's just a great comment here about the actual space that she's leaving, the way that she chose to do the lineation and leave the white space around some of the phrases. The spaces imply an emptiness that's almost unbearable. I totally agree.
I love that. I wanted to, yeah, to just talk about the form because, yeah, Jenny was talking about ways in which you can orchestrate form on through an erasure, less so with a blackout where you're kind of limited with where the letters fall. But here the form is, I think, I think erasure here, right? Yeah, but that it almost seems like it's like a reaching out on the page there. You know, the way in which those lines grapple towards the unsayable, but perhaps fail.
Yeah. And I also feel a kind of gracefulness in the lineation that I think is kind of ironic in the best of ways. Like also you can hear it in her reading. Like there's a gentleness or a gracefulness with how she has the lines cascading that belies the horrors under the poem.
Great. Yeah, so many wonderful, wonderful comments here. Yeah, that magic of the collect. I love that comment, Diana A. The magic of the collective possessive pronoun are. There is a kind of magic that transpires in this piece, something that is um, a small act of liberation that's happening through that engagement and in the repurposing of the original R. That's really wonderful. Um, in the interest of time, we probably have to move on to other things.
Yeah, a couple other good ones for just a
Oh,
quick.
right. We have others to share directly from our packet. And our idea with assembling this whole packet, the PDF, is that um, we wanted to err on the side of giving a lot. So there were plenty of other texts that we could have included, but we wanted to give a variety of different approaches. And so hopefully there's lots of readings and modes of poetry that will be inspiring for you all down the road. Let me share my screen again just so we can go through that. Just some of those. Let me click on here and it should do this. Great. Um, oh, is this?
Well, maybe we'll look at nets briefly, Matt.
Oh yeah, I put that in the I opened the wrong thing, Jenny George. So give me 2 seconds and let
Yeah.
me open the
And
thing that we
I
closed
wanted to
earlier.
just address one of the comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Bonnie is asking, so the form in erasure is more controlled by the writer? I think that's a great question. And so, yeah, I think you're getting at one of the differences between so-called erasure and so-called blackout. More choice about how the words and the lines fall on the page. Other folks have noted that Tracy K. Smith added the punctuation. She added the dashes. So bringing some of her poetic control as opposed to blackout where you may really just take a Sharpie to the words that you don't want to see, and then you're limited to the like original composition on the page, which we could look at when we see this next.
Which I am now ready to do. Um,
Jen Mervin's Nets adore. So do I, Diana A.
um, so is this
Great. Yes.
great? Is this correct? Let me just go to, let me view the whole slideshow. Great.
Oh, yes. So the poet Jen Bervin did some treatments of Shakespeare's sonnets. And so this might be an example of blackout in the sense of she's limited herself to the way that the sonnets appear on the page. And sonnets are they're such a kind of classic container, that box-like shape. And so she's stuck with the kind of original square of the sonnet and then kind of grayed out the background words that she wanted to erase and just let a few little phrases from the sonnets kind of surface through. And she's got an entire book. Nets is very much worth getting. And I like this because as an example, it's not so political. It's not really refuting so much Shakespeare's original intent. It's almost like distilling these sonnets or bringing forward aspects of love that are kind of like a little bit buried in the sonnets, letting them sort of come to the forefront.
Should I go to the next one?
Yeah. Hold me to my name, so beautiful. I have seen towers down raised, loss, loss. Like, what a beautiful way to talk about love that's sort of like inside of the original sonnet.
And I love that the way she leaves the ghost of the original text in place too, so you can see what is taken away, and highlighting, of course, the new text there. Um, Jenny, should I go on to the next example?
Yeah.
So here's another. Sorry about my flicking around there. This is another example that also leaves the ghost of the text, but to a very different effect. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. Nicole Sealey's The Ferguson Report is an erasure of the entirety of the Ferguson Report. And and what what Nicole Sealey does through the course of this text is, you can see here's just one example of one word that she is leaving behind. So you have the entirety of the original report ghosting through the background, of this new text that she's created. Not incidentally at all, a lot of white space there.
Mhm.
And then you see the way in which she's taken just the original, or individual letters rather, as composites to make a new text. And so you can make out the word there, bereaved, but when I first read the Ferguson report, um, I read it in one sitting, and it was one of the most powerful and memorable reading experiences I've ever had, because as you are working through it, you feel the language straining at itself. You see, like, words are pulling apart. It's like a taffy quality to the language, and language is collapsing. And we talk a lot about enjambments in poetry, how that line break can create an interesting turn. It happens within individual words, through the text. So here's another example. So you have all of that white space, and I really love that the publishers and allowed for like this much crossed out language that is whited out and ghosting the back to appear. And here you just have, night like men at a bus stop. But you see the example of what I'm talking about there, how what originally starts out as me with the men, the signifier transforms by the time we arrive at it. And this is a book that demands that we're constantly backtracking and trying to make sense of the language that we are encountering. It's just such a brutal and powerful
Mhm.
text.
There's something also that's like so physical, like the way that those lines are on the page. It reacquaints me with sort of the physical nature of language. Like that bereaved is so stretched, and so I almost get a bodily sensation when I read it. And so that's something that this form can afford, that just straightforward writing doesn't have in it.
Great. Um, should we I mean, in the interest of time, I feel like we could just keep talking about the Ferguson report and the Tracy K. Smith for a long time. For those of you who might not know those texts, again, I highly recommend that, you spend time with the entirety of Nicole Sealey's, just extraordinary, encounter with an intervention, with the Ferguson report. But we thought it might be helpful to talk to you about, our process and introduce you to some of the poems that we created from Thoreau's Walden.
Matt and I are longtime friends and poetry colleagues, and um, we got to do a project together. I can't recommend it enough to write a book with your friend. It's a really nice way to get to be in conversation and collaboration. We came up with the idea to do a collaborative erasure of Walden, in part because the original text of Walden represents some like shared aspects of our lives. One of those is place. I actually grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Amherst. I used to, in fact, walk by Emily Dickinson's grave on when I was cutting into town from high school to get a piece of pizza during my free period, which is cut through the graveyard and past Emily Dickinson's grave. So Amherst and Massachusetts is a big part of my history, and that's where Matt lives now. So we have this shared location, and Walden is such a signal text from that area. And also, the themes of Walden are something that we both resonate with up to a point. The kind of like engagement with place, the experiment in sort of solitude um, and self-reflection is something that I think Matt and I both share an interest in. And also we experienced the kind of canonical teaching of that text in our educations. And so we had that as a starting place. And also, I think both of us in different ways were interested in pushing back on some of those deeply flawed beliefs that the book comes out of this like absolute assumptions around the individual and a relationship to the natural world that is sort of dubious. Uh, Definitely Thoreau's relationship to the first peoples on that land felt like important to surface, and just his very patriarchal language and kind of assumptions around relationships between people. So both a kind of appreciation for the text and some bringing some critique. So we shared that as a relationship to the original, and decided to do this erasure project as an experiment in seeing what we could discover about the 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 original text. We ended up dividing the chapters and equally between us, and we did that approach where we followed the original order of the text and removed the words and passages that we didn't want, so that we were able to like find language that to come forward into the poems that we worked on. And for the titles, we drew phrases from the first chapter of Thoreau, which is a very long kind of logistical chapter called Economy. We pulled just resonant phrases from that first chapter as our titles, and then chapter by chapter worked through the rest of the book. Matt, what else would you add about our
I
process?
mean, just a couple of quick things. One is that we actually started a few failed erasure projects in the belly of the pandemic, and it was just a way to connect, a way of, it was like an outstretched hand to another fellow poet. I mean, this also, it seems like a similarly troubling time, and it can just be a way to, I don't know, maybe turn your back on the news for a little bit, or a way of connecting with other people, a way of bringing together a kind of community. And you don't have to overthink it, and it's okay if it doesn't result in anything other than some strange composites of language and a time spent with friends. And I think as Jenny and we had our initial ideas for engaging with Thoreau. But as we got further into the project, beyond thinking about, maybe his is the kind of patriarchal voice, as much as we admire many of the much of what he's advocating in Walden in terms of the engagement with the natural world, in terms of his close looking, that there was a patriarchal voice, a domineering patriarchal voice that maybe deserved a little bit of talking back to. But also, as we move forward, it also, the eco-poetics of what we were doing didn't occur to us until much later. The idea of Walden itself as a landscape, as a place literally becoming erased, given our environmental horrors, among so many others. Yeah, Jenny, maybe I'll turn over to you for the first poem that you want to read.
Yeah, and you'll pull it up on that same
Oh, yes, as promised. I will pull it up on one of the two things. So I think I had it here, right? Nope, it's in the other one. Sorry. I think this one will go away now. Um, and I will, 2 seconds. Apologies. There it is. Um, can you also, am I still sharing?
you're not.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing again, and I'll bring that right up, and we'll be ready to roll. Can we all see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
Um, I wanted to share this one with you all today because it's one of the tiniest poems in our collection, and this is an erasure of an entire chapter of Walden. So, in terms of that ratio of words left out to words kept in, this one leaves a lot of them out. And the title of this little poem is, again, one of those phrases pulled from the first chapter. it is, after all, always the first person that is speaking. I set out one afternoon, a poet, when I found myself suddenly uninhabited, a field, a field, before some fresh impulse had altered it. And, here I was really like my ear was kind of like pleased and interested in the cadence of these lines, like I set out one afternoon, I found myself suddenly. That's a very kind of Thoreauian phrase. And then also very interested in these questions of like habitation, like what's there originally, what's being imposed, and then this question of like who the first person is, who the I is. And Thoreau's first person is very, yeah, domineering in the original text. And I was interested in like kind of flipping that, or like finding other like qualities of speech or questions around who was speaking. That was one of the inquiries I was holding throughout our project. So that's part of how these little words and phrases got chosen in this erasure.
Um, Jenny, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you
No,
done?
please hop
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say to set up my poem, and maybe I'll just say a quick thing after I read it, is again, in terms of us not fully understanding the way in which it might work well to erase Thoreau together, is that the two of us together, Jenny and I, creating a we, became its own sort of corrective to the domineering I that we see all throughout Thoreau. So, and I mentioned that too because the poem I chose has a different, very different voice than Jenny's piece. Jenny, um, I felt such shame with my poems because Jenny, she is such an incredible poet, and she writes these honed gems, these beautifully distilled, compressed, complete poems. And I told her all throughout this that I felt like the voice that I brought more often than not to this project was something that I nicknamed Spazzy McGee. So you'll see how this is a little bit of more of a sprawling, bellowing voice than what the lovely voice that Jenny just shared, and the complex engagement there. It is true, I never assisted the sun materially in his rising, but I often did better. I sat and grew, ticking forward the passing day, a man without end, setting the grass, making the pines and hickories, pushing up through the embankment, pushing out from dry sticks which had seemed to be dead, stirring the glassy surface of the pond, my out of the way I am, unfolding amid the mountains, the I am blowing through woods without stopping, whirled around like leaves run wild, now more alone than ever, my I am cock crowing to fill the pauses, clear and shrill for miles, reaching up to your sills, under your windows, breaking through into your cellar, rubbing against the shingles for want of room. I'll just stop share for a quick second and say that, yeah, I mean, it's at some point it's like Thoreau as like starring in a horror movie about the patriarchy or something. I mean, he's coming for us. There's a kind of like you can't keep him away, and the compositive language that drew me in. I think for me, the hinge of this piece was it's actually from a very quiet chapter called Sounds. But that I am, which, for me is like, thinking about Yahweh, revealing himself to Moses in Exodus, I am that I am who I am. The kind of divine force of that voice and how it likes to think about itself as unstoppable and omnipotent. Um, I
Someone in the, someone in the chat is asking about like, did you ever find that you personally identified with the poetic I as you did this work? And I think that like slipperiness around identification is one of the kind of like fun curiosities of doing erasure. Like, yeah, can you take over that I? Are you a little bit mocking the original I? Does it become your own? I think those are choices and opportunities that you get to make along the way. And those two poems are pretty different, and one is a little bit more in the style that I tend to write, even when I'm just writing on the blank page. And I think Matt's expansive, kind of like accumulation of lines is more his style. So there is a way in which, like, even when you have a source material that's very much not your voice, you can still end up writing a poem that sounds like you, which it's kind of like a fun outcome of it.
We would love to move on now to a bit of a prompt for you all that we could try our hands at together. Jenny, why don't you introduce it and then I'll share the screen and we can try our hand at it. And I just, um, Jenny might be saying this too, but I do want to say like whatever we're doing here within this constraint of time is not meant to be a finished product. So this is also just a playful engagement with language and also to share how we might approach the text on the page very, very differently and create different possibilities.
So we thought, since this is Tell It Slant, a text that we could use, all of us, as a source text for a little erasure experiment, could be Thomas Wentworth Higginson's like a description of when he first meets Emily Dickinson. It's a pretty famous passage that ended up getting printed in the Atlantic Monthly. And so for those of you who don't know, he was a minister and author and activist, and sort of served as a correspondent and somewhat of a literary mentor to Dickinson. And he had been corresponding with her for a number of years before they met. And then he had a visit where he first met Emily and wrote this sort of account of that meeting to his wife. And then that later ended up published as a longer letter in the Atlantic. So we are going to take a look at this passage, and I think it works well for an erasure. Where our hope is, we haven't tried this yet, but because there's I think like genuine emotion in the original, and also we might bring questions of like how sensitive was he as an editor to her work. I think there's uh, a lot of ways in we might want to experiment with when we're working with this text, dancing with it, clapping back at it. So that's why we picked the Higginson passage.
And just to be clear too, whatever you make from this, don't think about it as a poem. It's just a new text, a new voice that you're creating from this. So I hope some of you may have had a chance to read this even beforehand or to print it up, but I'll share the screen. It's in your PDF as well. Oh, I think it's right here. Great. Is that all legible to people? Oh, are you seeing all of us? Maybe I can shrink that.
I'm
Nope.
seeing, yeah, I'm seeing the two halves, but there is on the one half of the screen, there's the text.
Okay.
And so approaches you might take when we get this up is you can, read it on the screen and write down phrases that kind of like catch your ear and catch your eye. If you have it printed out, you can circle letters and words that you want to keep, black out with a marker the ones you don't want. You could do the whole thing in a Word document just by actually erasing and, deleting the words. And we're going to spend about 10 minutes and just playing around with this and seeing what we get. And Matt and I are doing this too for the first time, and we'll share some of what we come up with. And if there's time and interest, we would love to see some of yours, hear some of yours too. So maybe we'll take until a few minutes past the half hour. Is that, Matt? We should go till 5:35 Eastern.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you, Brooke, for putting up the text.
I don't know how many people are, how much progress you're making, but it'd be great to come back together in just a few minutes. And again, we were not looking for anything finalized, but I think one of the things that will be fun to celebrate is just the variety of approaches and phrases that people used. And can always be something that you circle back to.
Some awesome ones coming up in the chat. I
Oh, are
love.
you seeing them? I haven't been able to see them.
Yeah, because you're writing too hard. We should stop and
Oh,
get to hear some of them. Yeah.
oh, because I'm sharing my screen. Um, can I stop the share? I want to see.
Yeah.
Um, Great. Oh, you made much
Yeah.
more progress than I did.
Fantastic. These are just crackerjack.
Yeah. Jenny, can you share some?
Um, let's see, they're going fast, but I want to, let me see if I can click on one. Um, oh, nope, they're going so fast, I'm losing them. Face to face with trees and blossoming shrubs, with flowers, with 2-day lilies, an instinct told me, sit still. That's a great one.
Um,
Patterning footstep, almost noiselessly, shy, quaint and nun-like, a childish way, in childlike fashion. I never see strangers, an excess of tension, an abnormal life, not altogether easy, enigmatical.
I'm just seeing one that just popped up. Unseen large square brook, New England, extremely faint. Forgive me, hardly Puritanism. Did not wish the pianoforte and ecstasy. Regain Shakespeare.
Awesome.
Uh, um, yeah, I've seen a lot of like a fragmentation of language as well, which is a great strategy. One of the things I didn't feel happy with what I came up with, but one of the things I found myself using as a strategy is to apply some of the condescending, sexist, demeaning language that Higginson is using to describe Dickinson and apply it to the speaker of this piece. So, like, I feel happier with my stance than what I ended up coming up with. I enjoyed calling the speaker nun-like and childlike, for instance.
Are you willing to read one of your little excerpts that you were inspired by, or do you rather just speak about it like on high like that? Why don't you give us a little example maybe of what you liked?
Of what I came up with? Oh, it's just a few. It's just basically a loopy sentence. I found myself fragrant in the hall, none-like, childlike, pausing sometimes to beg that I would one day secretly find an abnormal life.
That's great.
Just as a way of just disrupting the kind of, again, a domineering figure like Higginson, or at least the way that I think about him. There's so many great ones.
No.
Um, ooh, I love that ending from Kate Beale. These are the breath. Two
Mhm.
day lilies, these are the breath.
Yeah, there's an interesting mixed use of like pulling sort of like whole phrases. I found myself versus like little fragment, like just fragmented bits of words. Um, that's the same kind of choice around approach is available whenever you do your erasures. Um, Matt, timing wise.
I know. We have to move on. I mean, I'm sorry to move on because there have been so many great ones. It's been really fun to also to even to see where they start in such different places has been really wonderful to see. I think given that we only have 20 minutes left and we want to leave some time for questions and we want to leave some time to walk you through a little bit some additional samples and our prompt, which we hope will generate a lot of different possibilities. So Jenny, should I share my screen again?
Yeah.
Hopefully with the right thing. I'm going to share this. Great. Um, great. So we're just going to walk through some of these really quick, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. So here's an example. So what Jenny and I did there in with the Walden text was an erasure. And so like each one of those gaps, as Jenny was saying, is not at all to scale. So we are climbing through the entirety of a chapter, and whatever gap there is, whether it was 2 words or 4 pages, we just left that same kind of gap. On the left there is an example of not only blackout poetry, but collage added into blackout poetry. So this is a wonderful poet and blackout poetry collagist named Sarah Sloat. And I'm not going to read the text, but you can see the kind of thing that she's doing there. One reason why I wanted to show this is what she's blacking out is Stephen King's Misery. And the reason she's doing that is because it was what was assigned to her. It was the book that she ended up with. And so there's no significance to the text, but talk about a playful engagement. And this is one of the things that I think could be hopefully a really great community project for folks is to take a book. This is what we do every year at Smith. We take a text, we divide it up into pages, and we send it around so everyone has a chance to, interact with several different pages. Sarah Sloat does it really wonderfully there, and it's not political. It's just a playful engagement with some text from the past and making strange voices and arrangements of language from there. Oh yeah, Jenny, do you want to talk about Natalie Kirk
This
or?
is just an absolutely delightful project where a writer made blackout or erasure poems from her rejection letters that she got for applying for things and submitting things. So you sort of get a sense of it all at once. Uh, Notice Your Rage. That's a pretty wonderful poem to make out of out of a rejection letter. Dear Natalie, um, we uh, we took your time again, sincerely. Um, uh, just again, very playful, not political at all, quite personal erasure project.
And definitely not literature and not creating poems out of this. And one of the things I love about that Notice Your Rage erasure of a rejection is I assume the word there that she erased was encourage, and she transformed that into rage, which is a really lovely move. This is an artist whose work I didn't know before, who took the entirety. It's a little like the Anne Hamilton project, but more political, that was there on the cover of your PDF. And she took out, like literally carved out every single word in this white supremacist text. There's a lot I think we could unpack there, but I just wanted to show it as a kind of artistic way of thinking about erasure and a kind of a deliberate silencing of another voice. I'm really drawn to the complex fact of it creating a kind of intricate lace work through the removal of those words, and also just the meticulous patience it must have taken to work through that text. But it also seems important that the pile of words are just also left within sight of this book. Was that it from our? Oh no, oh no. Here's two more. Oh yeah, you want to talk about the Rufel?
Oh, Mary Ruefle is a fantastic poet, and one of her erasure projects is from this book, A Little White Shadow. Here she's whiting out words and kind of drawing the themes of death and mortality out of this book. The dead borrow so little from the past as if they were alive. Um, you can recognize again that scale of how many words she's leaving in versus how many that she's whiting out. And here that I think it's not a collage, but definitely the like the physicality of the page and the marks that she's making over the text are part of the artistry of these particular erasures.
And here are just two examples from that first project that I talked about involving a community blackout of Walt Whitman, ingeniously named by Jen Blackburn as Control Walt Delete, which is just fantastic. And you can see just the way that art becomes, such a vital part of this too. And sometimes it is just, there's so much there on the page, especially on the one with the beautiful moons, but there's just a little bit of text left behind, which can also work equally well and be equally resonant. Okay, we should get to the general prompt and then we can hopefully have still some time for questions. It's okay. Here is our simple, not so simple prompt for you all to try as a way of encouraging possibilities for you whenever you want to try exploring more of these erasures. Hold on, let me just move this to the side. Is that getting in the way of people's text, or is that just me?
It's all good.
Okay, great. So I'll just start with this first one. So choose a text that you want to try erasing. That is something that can be as arbitrary as choosing Stephen King's Misery, or it could be something that you really want to give some thought to. Maybe you have a real reason for wanting to tackle The Catcher in the Rye. Think about different kinds of text that might offer resonant possibilities or new opportunities of language. Brooke mentioned a book that I did with my wife that where I missing department. Part of that was erasing cowboy pulp fiction short stories. And it just offered, as you can imagine, a new kind of language that I personally would never otherwise include in one of my poems. Something like a yeehaw or a howdy created some interesting effects and just a different palette of diction there. We wanted to encourage you to think about things like emails, newspaper articles, advice columns, popular magazines, Wikipedia entries, speeches, historical texts, etc. You get it, right? All of these things can be really ripe possibilities of the kind of text that you might want to talk back to or just find a way of engaging with. Give some thought to for motivations of erasing your chosen text. Don't feel like you obviously need to ask for permission, but just think about it. Is it a playful engagement, for example, or a cathartic means of correction or talking back?
And then you'll want to decide something about the rules that you're going to follow. Are you going to erase and use individual letters like that bereaved in the Ferguson report? Will you want to do actual, like physically black out or white out words on the page, or pull them and then lineate on your own, maybe on a separate piece of paper or in a Word document? And will you want to use like a long text or a short text? And once you've made the rules for yourself, do you want to break them? Of course, that's also up to you.
And then again, we can't stress this enough. There is no one way to do this. And so this advice just comes from things that Jenny and I experienced when we were doing our own erasures, but you will come up with your own way of doing it. But in case this is helpful, it may be helpful to first read the selected text through in its entirety. Jenny, did you do that with your Thoreau chapters? Did you start there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let it all kind of wash over.
Yeah, and as I read, I would just circle words and phrases that seemed like they might be compelling, something that I might want to come back to that might create a possibility. Once you begin connecting phrases and words, allow for multiple possibilities as you progress. So, like, I would have a kind of like choose your own adventure grid of different verbs that might follow a noun, for instance. Um, and then if you just skim down a little bit further, rejoice in being thwarted, as if that were easy to do. So if you're creating an erasure and hit a dead end trying to say what you think you want to say, allow the text to offer something potentially quite different from where you thought you were headed. Erasing a text can be a little like working with a received form, such as the sonnet. The prescribed constraints of language can be exactly what you need. And Jenny, I don't know if you experienced this, but I had moments with our book of Thoreau erasures where I was just like, I just need a from. Like everything will be okay if I can just find myself a from. And often that from was not there. And I had to find another way to angle into wherever I was going. And I think whatever I ended up with, I think ended up being better and at least much more unexpected and thus better than what I had originally set out to do.
Yeah, it's that constraint being generative ultimately, even though it's uncomfortable as it's happening.
Yeah. And then you want to do the last one?
Well, we just did say that it's always fun to think about doing a collaboration. So that could be like page by page with another writer or friend or collaborator, or you could get multiple people to do the same text and sort of see what you come up with. And of course, there's also getting after it in a more sculptural or artistic way using collage or other techniques. So we just invite you to have fun. And I wish there were a way to see all of the erasures that you all are talking about in the chat, because I can tell that some of you have deep practice with this form.
Oh, great. Lots of other additional possibilities there. Yeah. And we have many, many more in the PDFs or the PDF that we provided to you all. Wonderful. Yeah. Oh, and Zoom as a tool is really great. Yeah. What a wonderful tool that we have. Fantastic. Well, I think we've got 10 minutes left. Thank you all for being such an incredible audience and engaging with the chat in the way that you have, and also creating such beautiful, wonderful, resonant, curious erasures of that letter from Higginson. It's great. It's been so great to spend some time with you this afternoon. I think we have time for a few questions if people have them, or yeah, why don't we just start with some questions? We have 10 minutes.
There's a couple already kind of teed up in
Oh,
the Q&A.
oh,
Um,
great.
One is from Bonnie. You said fragmentation of language is a great thing. So in erasure, is it okay to scramble the original text, use the words in a different order? I mean, of course it is okay. See how that feels to you and see what you come up with. There's a version of it where you could cut out every word and, put it in a bag and shake it around and, pull them out and see where you get. I think at some point you might be working in a different form, if it might be not really a so-called erasure. But yes, it's definitely okay to scramble, and you could try limiting yourself to the order of the words, and then if it's just like too frustrating, not generative, then yeah, mix it up.
And one of the things too, in case this is of interest or helpful, that Sarah Sloat might do, or another blackout poetry artist, is that if you think about a single page as the playing field that you have, you can also find ways to direct the viewer's gaze to read the text in a different order. So even if it starts here and this would be where the text would go next, you can first make the reader go there, or not make, but you can draw a line somehow there and then go back there. And so you can just orchestrate it in a very different way. Oh, yeah. I see that question about, are there permissions problems when erasing from something contemporary, such as Stephen King? Because, of course, someone has want to publish my work, right? I can't answer that in terms of Stephen King. All I can say is I know Sarah Sloat had reached out to Mr. King at some point. I don't know what happened with that permission or how that goes. It is an important consideration, especially if you are hoping to get it published. I mean, to work with something like Higginson's letters or Shakespeare sonnets, you obviously don't have to worry about copyrights in the same way. But that is something to think about. And then sometimes something contemporary might be exactly what you want to erase, and it doesn't matter. You're not thinking about publication, but just thinking about, I have some things to say to this particular text.
And one of our participants said in the chat that they used to do next door posts. I think you're fully able to use posts from next door um, without copyright issues. I would love to see those erasures.
I love that. That's such a great idea. Yeah, we didn't include that in our original list of possibilities. Really wonderful. I'm seeing something about dogs in the chat. Um, yeah. Um, any other questions? We can also, Brooke says that she can magically unmute someone if you want to ask us something. Oh, that's the dogs. That's the next door erasure. Is dogs, dogs. I love it. Am I reading that correct?
That'd
Um,
be great.
yeah. Yes, thank you for talking about the Tom Phillips text as well, right? Which is such a gorgeous erasure project of Milton, correct? Of Paradise Lost. Um, great. If anyone, you're welcome to raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted and have a question, or we can also take more questions in the Q&A box. Great. And I appreciate what, yeah, Scott is saying too in terms of a copyright issue, right? If you're scrambling the text the way Jenny was talking about, you do not have to worry about it. Um, any other questions?
How
Oh,
long?
great. Oh, the next door erasures will be up. Fantastic.
Oh,
Yes.
that'll be really fun. Um, One question here, Matt. How long did it take you all to work on your collaboration? Did either of you reject what the other had done? Start us off, Matt.
In terms of length, we took our time with it. We weren't in any rush with it, and so I think our pace was we would assign ourselves the chapters, and then we would just hang tight until someone reached out. I think we normally give ourselves about 2 weeks to do each one, just given other things we had going on in our life. So I don't remember the exact duration of things, but we would give ourselves about 2 weeks to work on it. And then, we haven't talked about this, but there's the original erasure that Jenny, tell me if you did this too. Like I would come up with what I thought was the first erasure, and then the poem that is created starts to offer up its own themes, and I would subsequently understand what those themes were and go back and revise and try and find like, is it better if I begin here, or is it better if I have a whole nother turn of phrase here as a way of accenting the themes that I'm starting to realize the poem is showing me?
Yeah, same. And then when we had like a fully realized draft, we would share the drafts with each other. And Matt and I have a practice of looking at each other's work already. And then because you can't edit an erasure, you can't suggest new language in an erasure because of the rules that we had agreed to, we would talk about them as drafts. Like, is there clarity issues? Is it are parts working? Are there words or phrases that maybe need to come out, and then we would do another pass sort of based on the conversation. But the editing process had to be a little bit more hands-off than normal just because of the constraints. But we did do, yeah, conversation, sort of like editorial pass at each other's work, and then a kind of another round of revision.
I think, what I would often do, and I think Jenny maybe did this too, is I would come back to her with a question, and I would say like I have a question. Is this part clear? Or if here are two options. Could we do that? Which was really really helpful. So I would never dream of rejecting anything Jenny sent my way, but we would help each other out when necessary. And then maybe this is a good note to end on, is that we wrote the conclusion together. We were. I was really happy to reunite with Jenny in Santa Fe, where we first met. And we had this really unique challenge for us because we had completed all the chapters, but the final conclusion, and we had divided them up thus far equally. And so we sat at Jenny's kitchen table and wrote the conclusion together. And it was such a fascinating process that we each, I think, hit our own dead ends, and then we listened to what each other had generated and found ways together to create new phrases and things that I hadn't noticed at all. Jenny brought out, and then think maybe vice versa. And it was really lovely and fascinating to do that together and have it be an authentic collaboration.
Yeah, and I think, writing a poem from scratch together might be especially hard, but because we were really looking at the same, like cache of language, it was sort of like both of our heads were bent over the text and like, oh, what about this word? Or could we link it to this? So having that kind of like third thing that we are both looking at, I think really was, yeah, it helped the collaboration in that final moment.
And DY, your question is really a great one. How to get over the feeling of cheating as a poet. I know that's not really true, but part of me feels that way. I get it, actually, and I felt that way for a long time too. And I think for Jenny and I both, we were writing our own poems, facing the abyss of that blank page at the same time that we were doing this project. But it just became more resonant and meaningful to do the work together. And as we started to understand what our themes were, and so it didn't feel like cheating. It became something that was one other compelling way, other for us, compelling way to generate poetry. Jenny, what would you say to that?
Yeah, like it's almost like a persona poem. I wouldn't call that cheating. It's like putting something on that like yeah, liberates you a little. Okay, I'm gonna take on the voice of someone else or something else, and but still it'll be my voice inside of that. Like it's almost like a persona poem to the next level, where yeah, you're using
Hmm.
another voice to start. So technically it's not you, but you're still gonna find, I think, the thing that is essentially you inside your choices. And so yeah, I would definitely say it's not cheating. And I also I relate to the feeling. Sometimes I feel like I'm cheating, even writing my own poems. So it's like, of course, that feeling is available. But yeah, you're fully licensed to take on erasures. It's not cheating, and you might discover something that you didn't even know that you wanted to say.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi. I'll just add to that because Michael made a really nice comment that I think applies to everybody here. You are the real deal. Just be true to yourself.
Hmm.
It's really
Yes.
true. What an incredible group of people we've been hanging out with tonight.
For your beautiful engagement.
Yeah, these comments were wonderful. And yeah, again, thanks so much for doing this. And Brooke, thanks so much for inviting
Oh
us.
my gosh, thank you for being here. It's just been so much fun. I did the blackout exercise too. I don't always get to do that while I'm facilitating, and so I was really glad to be able to do that. Thank you for that activity.
You'll have
Uh,
to share it with us later.
I I will. And it's in the chat. And actually, that's a reminder that you all can save the chat. So this is a good time to do that. If you go down to where you would be entering text into the chat, there's an icon with three dots. You can click on it and save this chat. A reminder that you can find the PDF that they have been sharing all evening on the website for this program, which you've already probably seen in the chat. Just a huge thank you to you, Matt Donovan and Jenny George, for so much wisdom, so much humor, so much creativity. And I hope that you will all go and check out their book. Again, I'm going to put this link in the chat because they have gone to the trouble of creating a coupon code for us to use so that we can buy it for only $10. So I hope you'll go do that. And remember, there's so much more festival to come. We are doing this now through Sunday, bringing so much more poetry and fun, and we hope that you will join us for that. Later this evening, there is a virtual panel entitled The Interior and the Other on
Hmm.
poetic and psychic transformation, and that starts at 7:30 featuring Ayelet Amete, who is in the house tonight, or at least
Hmm.
was earlier,
All
um,
right.
and Dana Levin, who was being invoked earlier. So
There's
I think that means we all have to go to that. And coming up tomorrow, the Emily Dickinson Poetry Marathon continues. There will be an afternoon program on food and free verse. And then in the evening, we are bringing you our Phosphorescence Poetry series, the final episode of our season, the festival edition, which features Livia Meneghin, Meg Day, and Rajiv Mohabir. So that's going to be an amazing night. Remember, we love doing this for you for free, and also we can't do it without your support. So if you are able to make a donation, we really appreciate you. Thank you just for being here, everyone. Thanks, Matt and Jenny.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
all.
much. Yeah, thank you so much.
See you soon.